Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys my WWE Marquee matches reviews. And with Evolution coming up tomorrow night, WWE Network has released a lot of matches pertaining to the woman, because Evolution's coming up this Sunday. Um, so I figured I would go back and watch every one of these matches, so that way I can hype myself up for Evolution coming up this Sunday. And I do gotta say that I do kind of feel the hype a little bit watching all these videos pertaining to Evolution talk and women's wrestling and watching, you know, old women matches. Um, and what I mean by old is like matches that happened in the past. Um, and they did release one first when Trish Stratus and Lita main evented Raw, but I already reviewed that match when I did the Superstar picks with Sasha Banks, and I figured that I'd just be saying the same thing as I did in that video, so I'm just gonna kind of skip that one. So if you want to check out what I thought of that match, go to my Superstar picks playlist and you'll see it there. Um, but let's talk about um, this matches. This was hosted by Charlie Caruso, and it was from NXT Takeover Brooklyn, the inaugural NXT Takeover Brooklyn. It was for the NXT Women's Championship. It was NXT Women's Champion Sasha Banks versus Bayley. And I gotta say, this has to be one of the best stories that NXT's ever told. Um, you know, um, in the history of NXT. Pretty much, this was a 2 year story that was built and built and built. Um, I don't think it's the best one they've told, but I think it's definitely the top three. Pretty much, it was um, Bayley and Sasha Banks. Bayley was the typical underdog, good girl who always did the right thing to try to win the title, but never was quite able to win the championship. You've seen that a lot in wrestling. And Sasha Banks was the heel that always tried to undercut Bayley and was the absolute bitchy heel. And obviously, this didn't start originally. Sasha Banks eventually just ended up turning heel. Sasha Banks was like Bayley originally, where she was the good girl to try to fit in with everybody, but then eventually she would turn heel, and when she became the boss, she started to make a name for herself in NXT. Bayley would try to chase after the NXT Women's Championship. She would beat um, Sasha Banks on a couple of occasions to become the number one contender. She tried to win it first at NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way against Charlotte, but failed, and then tried a second time, failed again, and afterwards she would get attacked by Sasha Banks time in and time out. Eventually, Sasha Banks herself was put into the title picture. Sasha Banks formed an alliance with Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks, would take out Bayley, constantly trying to put an end to her dreams of becoming NXT Women's Champion. And Sasha Banks herself tried to win the championship. She failed at NXT Takeover, All Evolution, and then on a few episodes of NXT. Um, but then eventually at NXT Takeover Rival, we had, the Four Horsewomen. Were the originals of NXT, which the Four Horsewomen was known as Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Bayley, and Sasha Banks. And they had a big Fatal 4-Way match, and Sasha Banks beat Charlotte, well, pinned Charlotte to win the NXT Women's Championship. And Sasha Banks would go on her run as the NXT Women's Champion. She would um, beat people like Charlotte and Becky Lynch to keep her NXT Women's Championship. Meanwhile, you had Bayley, who constantly kept getting beaten down and suffered a hand injury, preventing her from um, putting her out of action for a few months. And you also had Becky, Sasha, and Charlotte get called up to the main roster while Bayley was down in NXT, kind of waiting her time and waiting for her moment in the sun. Um, and eventually, Bayley finally came back, and she wanted to, she would start to score all these big victories. She wanted to finally do whatever it took to win that NXT Women's Championship. She went through the opponents. She beat Charlotte. She beat Becky Lynch in a number one contenders match, and she finally had to get through Sasha Banks, the one person that continuously held Bayley back from winning the NXT Women's Championship. And I thought it was a hell of a way to, a hell of a storyline, and it was really awesome. They had that really big contract signing where Sasha Banks was talking trash to Bayley, and this was even at the height when Stephanie McMahon went on Raw and announced the launch of the Divas Revolution. But really, NXT was already miles ahead of the main roster when it came to Evolution, the Divas Revolution. Uh, the NXT Divas were never known as Divas; they were known as women. They were the standard bearers. They went out there, they wrestled the matches, they main evented the shows, and yeah, it was it was a hell of a build up. And you had Sasha Banks come out in the car, and you had Bayley come out with a inflatable tube bin, and you had the match, and the match was commentated by Corey Graves, Rich Brennan, and Byron Saxton. And I still remember watching this match then. I did watch it again, but it's like this match is just so good. Um, Sasha Banks immediately just starts talking trash to Bayley, saying that she doesn't belong in this spot, that she's a loser, and Bayley just tackles Sasha Banks to the ground, beats the crap out of her, and Bayley pretty much gets the advantage throughout the beginning of the matchup. But then Sasha Banks goes after the leg of Bayley. She would try to go for a double knees in the corner a couple of times, but Bayley would continuously reverse it. And Sasha Banks threw Bayley into the barricade and just really dominated Bayley. She ended up finally hitting the double knees, where she put Bayley on the top turnbuckle and hit the double knees that way. I thought that was a hell of a way to do it. And Bayley ended up kicking out of it. And Sasha Banks continued to talk trash to Bayley and said that she's a loser, she doesn't belong here, tells her to stay down. And Bayley would get sick of it, tackle Sasha Banks to the ground and beat the crap out of her, throw her out of the ring. But then Sasha Banks would go after the injured hand of Bayley, hitting up on the top rope. She put it up against the steps and into the steps and stomped on the steps. She bent her hand back on the floor and stomped on it. And then Sasha Banks hit a springboard plancha on the outside. And she put her in the ring and tried to cover her, but Bayley kicked out. And Sasha Banks went to do some sort of old school type move or something, but Bayley shoved her off. And Sasha Banks was laid out on the floor. And Sasha Banks just beats the 10 count to get back in the ring. And then Bayley starts to make a comeback. Bayley hits a springboard elbow drop on Sasha Banks. She ended up hitting a suplex into the turnbuckles. And Bayley just started to really become on fire. And eventually, Sasha she goes for a roll up. She ends up kicking out, and when Sasha Banks kicks out, she turns it into the bank statement. And Bayley does everything she can to try to get to the ropes, but Sasha Banks stomps on the injured hand of Bayley, and Bayley rolls through and reverses it into a bank statement of her own. And Sasha Banks is able to get to the ropes, which I thought was a nice spot. And then Sasha Banks is holding the ropes. Bayley's got her by the leg. She pulls her away. Sasha lands on her feet, and Bayley immediately hits a Bayley to belly on her, which I thought was a hell of a maneuver. And Sasha Banks ends up kicking out of it, and we were supposed to have thought Bayley was going to win the title. I thought that was awesome. And then Sasha Banks shoves Bayley off the top rope when she goes for a Hurricanrana. And Sasha Banks hits a Meteora from the top turnbuckle, covers her, and Bayley kicks out again. And then the finish comes when Bayley hits a reverse Frankensteiner onto Bayley from the top turnbuckle and hits the Bayley to belly on her for the win. She even took off her elbow, her wristband or whatever, and hits the Bayley to belly, gets the win, and Bayley finally wins her first NXT Women's Championship. And it was a great culmination to a 2-year story. She celebrates with the championship, and then Charlotte and Becky Lynch come into the ring, and they embrace Bayley. And then Sasha Banks shows her respect, and they do the 4 horsewoman pose. And that was pretty much the end of the match, and that's about all I have to say about it. It's a hell of a match. If you had to rate this match, you would definitely rate this 4 and 3/4. Yeah, definitely 4 and 3/4. It's a great match, a great story, and it's probably one of the best NXT matches in history. Um, Obviously, too, it really this match really set the tone for the women's evolution. Because obviously, what WWE doesn't want to tell you, and what a lot of people forget, is that the Divas Revolution originally started off really bad with the factions with Team PCB, Team Bella, and Team Bad, and then this match kind of, I would say, got, NXT was just doing the women's revolution a lot better. They didn't even say it was in a revolution, and it makes me really sad to watch this match, knowing the spot that Sasha Banks and Bayley are in now. Because what would happen is a month later, they would have the first ever main event on a WWE special at NXT Takeover Respect, where they had the first ever 30 Iron Woman match where Bayley would win in the main event, and then when it was pretty much Sasha Banks' last match in NXT, she would go to the main roster, and she started feuding with Charlotte for the Divas title at the time, and then it led to the triple threat match between Becky Lynch, Charlotte, and Bayley at WrestleMania 32, where Charlotte won and became the inaugural Women's Champion. And then Charlotte and Sasha Banks started having their feud. They would have the first ever Hell in a Cell match, first ever Women's Falls Count Anywhere match. They would main event Raw again. Um, and they would have the second ever 30 Iron Woman match at Roadblock End of the Line, where they would exchange the women's title. Around this time, Bayley, was doing her run in NXT. She was running roughshod, really putting on some great matches for the NXT women's title. Then eventually would go on to lose it at NXT Takeover Dallas, and then she would have another great build up story to get in a rematch. She would get a rematch at NXT Takeover Brooklyn 2 in the same arena where she won this one, but lost, and then was finally called up to the main roster. Even though she had been at Battleground teaming up with Sasha Banks to defeat Charlotte and Dana Brooke, and then they had the triple threat match at Clash of Champions 2016. Charlotte, um, Bayley, and Sasha Banks, where Charlotte won. And then Charlotte and Bayley went into a feud for the Raw Women's title, and Bayley beat Charlotte for the Raw Women's title in an episode of Raw. She broke Charlotte Flair's pay-per-view undefeated streak at Fastlane 2017. They all had a four-way match involving Nia Jax at WrestleMania 33, where Bayley was victorious there. And then Bayley would lose the Raw Women's title at Extreme Rules. No, actually, no, at Payback 2017. That's pretty much where Bayley and Sasha Banks' career went to crap, because Bayley was obviously booked really bad with the This Is Your Life segment, the Candlestick on a Pole match at Extreme Rules, and Sasha Banks would be booked a little bit better. She would have Raw Women's title reigns that would only last like a month, not even a month. It would last like 2 weeks, and if you probably add up all her 4 Raw Women's title reigns, it probably adds up to like a month. Um, and then they're doing this whole weird thing where Sasha Banks and Bayley are like best friends, and they tried to tease like they were gonna go for a feud, tease a lesbian storyline. It's really bad. And then obviously now we have the first ever all women's pay per view, and one of the two women that really kickstarted this women's revolution is thrown into like a nothing 6 woman tag team match on the show. It's really sad when you watch the match back now to know the spots that Bayley and Sasha Banks are in, because in this same show, Charlotte and Becky Lynch are having a last woman standing match for the SmackDown women's title. Because Becky Lynch, she struggled a little bit, but she was the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion, and then lost it, and then kind of was just floundering around for a while, and then just recently won it from Charlotte Flair because she turned heel when nobody wants to boo her. Charlotte Flair's just been tearing it up on the main roster, winning the Raw Women's title a ton of times. She's a 2-time SmackDown Women's Champion, and I think she's a pretty much a 7 or 8 time Women's Champion, so that's pretty impressive right there. As for where the commentators are, Corey Graves would commentate NXT. until 2017, and then now he commentates both Raw and SmackDown, and all the pay-per-views. And then Rich Brennan's released because Tom Phillips took his job, and Byron Saxton is the babyface commentator. He'd be the babyface commentator for NXT until I think the end of 2015, and then he would be the babyface commentary team on the main roster, and now he just mainly does SmackDown. He did Raw for a while, but then was drafted over to SmackDown. And Charlie Caruso is pretty much in the same spot, except now she works for both WWE and ESPN. So pretty much my the end of this video. Really have nothing left to say. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what you guys think of this match, and if you guys agree with everything I said. That's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please make sure you guys like, comment, and share this video so people will watch it. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more content and click on the bell. So that way, every time I upload a video, you guys get the notifications for it. Make sure you guys do the same thing for my CM Brothers and Owen Talking to YouTube channels. And that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.